All right. Hello, world out there. Happy Wednesday. Happy April 22nd. So thanks for joining us again. This is day 3 of our copywriter pitching strategy week. So the whole idea was basically to help copywriters, content writers, and really creatives, break through some of those struggles that they're having when we want to reach out to people, when we want to get our name out there, when we want to use this extra time efficiently and effectively to kind of keep these networks alive. So today, I'm very excited that I get to speak with my friend Mai-kee, who I met, I think just over a month ago at TCC, at the Copywriter Club
I
conference.
think you need to flash your shirt now.
Yeah. Oh,
Plug.
yeah. I got to rep TCC all the way. Shout out to Kira and Rob. But yeah, I'm really excited to speak with Mai-kee. She's a podcast guest pitching expert that really helps copywriters and also just professionals and entrepreneurs get on these podcasts, and not only get on these podcasts, but position them in a way that actually helps their business grow and helps them really get their name out there. So welcome, Mai-kee. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me here, Tyler. I mean, it was awesome to meet you in real life, even though we actually didn't have a chance to speak. So I'm glad that, we kind of managed to fit in a Zoom chat, and here we are. So I'm so excited to be here today on Get Your Pitch On.
Yeah.
I love the name of the event.
Thank you. Yeah, it was because I think the first time that obviously it was like a 3-day conference, but when you went on the hot seat and you started talking about the business, it really started I think it was kind of like a hot seat for all, we were all looking at
Everything's clicking.
Everyone's having these ideas of what podcasting can be for themselves. And it was just really refreshing to hear because I think podcasting is one of those things that everyone has in the back of their minds as a would-be nice thing. But to hear somebody really that focuses on it and specializes in it, it was pretty refreshing to hear. So thanks for being you.
Thank you very much. I should have done an Elvis Presley voice. Hang on. Thank you very much.
That was actually really, really good. Wow. All right. So we're just going to jump right in, guys. So we're going to talk about kind of with a focus for copywriters. But like I said, this stuff really applies to any entrepreneur that wants to start being featured on podcasts and kind of adding this to their strategy. So first question I've been asking people is why, so specifically for you, why podcasting, and how did you kind of get started and maybe, gravitate towards podcasting as opposed to, other channels like guest posting or other partnerships? So why podcasting, and also what has it kind of done for you and your business?
Oh, great starter question. So the reason why I picked podcasting is because I actually used to do YouTube and live videos, and I'm not discrediting them at all. I just found that my ideal customer, which is someone who you always need to think about when it comes to showing up online, my ideal person doesn't have the time to watch videos that are 30 minutes long, right? And that's how long my live streams used to be. And I realized around that time I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and it's how I really felt like I knew someone, even though they actually didn't know me, if that makes sense. And then I realized that podcasting was actually the medium that was for me, because actually, even though in my past business life, I did identify as a copywriter, I didn't, for some reason, gravitate towards guest blogging, which should have been it. It wasn't. And that's because everybody has a different way in processing the processor. Walk out loud to make sure it's all right. So some copywriters are actually verbal processors, but because of their identity as a copywriter, they feel like they shouldn't venture out doing anything else, because I felt like I was almost betraying my copywriter self by picking podcasting. But it actually did wonders for me. And how I got started in there is actually because of Rob and Kira from the Copywriter Club. So I was in their think tank mastermind, and I really struggled with putting myself out there consistently. And I'm sure some people who are watching this can resonate when say that sometimes the referral well runs dry. And if you don't do anything proactively to keep it running, then you may find yourself in a very, very dry month. And so that's what happened to me. So I waited too long. And then I just like shared my problems like with Rob and Kia. I was like, what do I do? And they were like, get on podcast, put yourself out there. You've got the knowledge, you've got the experience. So just let people know about you. And that's what propelled me to challenge myself to reach out to 101 podcasters in 30 days last year. And I want to say all of these pitches, they were personalized. They weren't just like copy and paste or anything like that. They were each individually tailored. So I probably don't recommend that much, per person who's think of doing this. But that really set me on the path. And I got a booking, like one yes in every 3 pitches I sent. And it really organically grew into something that I wanted to help others with, because I knew so many copywriters who were so amazing at what they do, but no one knows of them because they're hiding behind their screens, and they don't realize that they're hiding most of the time because they just do what they do. And so now it's my job or my business, I'd say. I love helping people to amplify their voices and share their message so they can expand their reach and make an impact. And so now I help teach this in my group programs, and now do it for my clients, and I love it. So I can talk about it all day long. So tell me, how can I help you? How can I help everyone who's listening?
I love that, because I think like you said, you almost felt like you're betraying copywriting by not wanting to do guest posts. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of us have, is we think of guest posting as the route to be featured,
Yes.
and the route to kind of, make these relationships. But it comes down to what you're comfortable with, what you kind of naturally gravitate to as a person, because there's so many different routes to get out there. So if you like talking, if you like kind of just, this back and forth, then I think podcasting is just such a huge, huge opportunity, especially in the last couple of years, where it's obviously kind of blown up, and the reach is just so far.
100%.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's say we're starting kind of from the beginning. So actually we can just like use me as a case study. So
okay.
as someone that like wants to, we like the idea of podcasting. We're comfortable. We have maybe, we listen to a few podcasts. We have some people that we're thinking that would be nice to kind of, approach them or kind of make this a part of our strategy. How do you organize like your plan of attack? Like if I'm saying I want to tomorrow start pitching on guests, or maybe not pitching yet, but tomorrow I want to start this process of being on podcasts. How do you organize your plan of attack, and what are some things that you have to consider before kind of just jumping right in?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked this, because so many people just like jump straight into the pitching without the prior strategy. So what I would ask you to ask yourself really is, 1, who am I trying to reach? And 2, what do I want to talk about? Because we know so many business owners who have great ideas, but sometimes they jump into it too quick without validating it first. So that's why, again, you really need to think of the person who you want listening. Whose earbuds do you want to grace, basically, with your voice? And so they are the people who's going to be listening to your voice on these podcasts. So you need to think about them first, and you need to think about the industry they're in, what are their current struggles, which stage of awareness are they in, and where can I come into the mix? And you need to ask yourself, like, what do I actually want to get out of podcasts? Like, how are you going to measure it with the hard and soft metrics? So many of my students, for example, they pick email list building, as one of the big things that they want to focus on. So they want to grow the email list organically. So when you kind of like offer a freebie at the end of an interview, that's how they do it. So I'm kind of like, okay, you want to do that, but do you have everything in place? Is your topic something you want to talk about? Is it going to help the listener with where they're at? Do you have it set up on the landing page? Is it connected to your email? Like, do you have the nurture sequence in place? I mean, before we do anything, we need to make sure that all your back-end systems are set up for the goals you actually want to achieve.
Okay. And then, so when you're talking about figuring out the topics and things like that, as far as how, things that you want to talk about, what is kind of a process that you have as far as figuring out what topics would make sense to kind of, move forward with during your podcast pitching?
Yeah. So I call it the connect the dots exercise. So this is like obviously derived from Steve Jobs in his commencement address. where he shares that you can't connect the dots looking forward, only backwards. And this also helps you shape your story as well. But you need to ask yourself, like, what led me to this point and what gives me the unique right and credibility to be able to help others with this process? So like I think about my podcast getting journey, and I want to help people do this. I need to know my why. And because I know there are so many purpose-driven entrepreneurs out there who don't share their voice enough, and as a result we have other people who have less good intentions winning. And so that's why I do what I do. And so you need to really know your why first of all, and then it really connects with your story and your ideal customer avatar and sort of thing. So in your story it's kind of like, okay, what can I pick out of there that's teachable? What can I bring out that's actually going to be helpful when I share it with another person? Because there are so many people who get value just from being like a fly on the wall, you know, eavesdropping into these podcast conversations. So you got to ask yourself, is there something about my story or my process that I do in my business that can be helpful to someone? And that normally, like, the topics come out. It's not always an easy process because we're so close to our own stuff that if you just ask other people, hey, what do you think I'm good at in my business? Then you can probably just get it from other people's opinions, actually. Like, just ask your fellow trusted peers and they actually might be able to highlight something you haven't thought of.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of like podcasting is an opportunity to really kind of look at yourself in the mirror and actually like pat yourself on the back a little bit.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of copywriters don't really take the time to do, is look at what am I actually really good at, what makes me special, and what do people, you know, want to hear me talk about. And I think just making that like an intentional exercise, it opens up obviously a lot of podcasting opportunities, but a lot of opportunities in general, just how to kind of complete your brand and kind of just be in your zone comfortably.
Yeah, a lot of self-reflection in the process. So, and it's pretty fun because like you have an opportunity to not reinvent yourself per se, but kind of like really own what you already have. And you're right, I think copywriters are so humble in the sense that like they don't even realize how incredible they are and the things that their gifts can do for other people. We're kind of like, oh yeah, you know, push it aside. I'm not used to this praise. But you know, the process, it kind of like forces you to evaluate your past wins. And like I suggest that you create something, I call it a value vault. We just put Belinda Weaver, for example, she calls it her yay file, which she shared at the event as well. And it's like a folder or a jar, like whether you want it physical or digital is up to you, but anything where you can put in all of your wins and what makes you uniquely credible to help other people to do it. Because I know that many of us, we've taken the same program. So it's kind of like, oh, I've done copy school too, you know, that sort of thing. So what makes me special? And the whole connect the dots thing, when you look back on your own story and what led you here, your experiences and your skill sets will never be 100% identical to anybody else. And that is what's beautiful, because we all have a place in this world. And I help a lot of copywriters to do this. So I know that it's not just like one copywriter is allowed to be on podcast. It's like, no, let's find your unique angle so your type of copywriting and expertise can come to the mix.
Yeah, and there's so many, like, we all do have our unique qualities and stories, but then like you said, at the same time, there's a lot of people that are want to be a fly on the wall during some of these podcasts. So you never really know who is going to connect with a certain element of your story. And there's literally no way that they're going to hear it unless you share it with them through kind of these channels.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've done this exercise where we figure out what our topics are. What do we want to talk about? What is a special part of our story that we want to share? So from there, how do you go about kind of prospecting, I guess, if you will, like kind of figuring out the podcasts or the people, the hosts that you want to make relationships with? How do you go about, kind of building that prospect list? And then how do you go about actually, warming them up in a way that just it's kind of, conducive, I guess, to positive responses and not like just pitching and be like, hey, I want to talk about myself on your show. How do you kind of, how do you organize that process?
Yeah, I love this question because I want to say that I don't completely rule out cold pitching, because that's actually what I still do and what I teach. And there is a way, I think cold pitching just gets a bad rap because of the word cold, but there is a way to have a warm outreach with a cold pitch. just saying. But to answer your question with like, how do you warm people up if you want to have like a prior relationship with the host? So first, what I would do when it comes to prospecting and finding a list of podcasts, I'd first think, what is the podcast I actually do want to be on? Because this idea wouldn't have come out of nowhere. You would have had a kind of like a dream podcast that you actually do want to be on. And maybe you've seen a couple of your peers be on certain podcasts as well. This is something I called peer at your peers. So I literally, I just keep an eye out. If a fellow peer of mine, a fellow copywriter, is on a podcast, I would take screenshots of, because normally when they promote it, they normally like, put a link or like a graphic of the podcaster and the podcast itself, right? So I basically take a screenshot and I add it into my phone and I add it to my list. And obviously I check it out to see if it's a good fit for me, like, value-wise, brand-wise. And so that's a very easy way that you can get started. Just look at the other podcasts your peers have been on. But if you want to go down on a more, like not so much, the current circles that you're in, then just think of your dream podcast. Go on Apple Podcasts with that. Actually, give me an example. Is there a podcast that's like on your radar right now? And then we're just going to like envision this.
I'm pretty keen on the Copywriter Club podcast.
Oh, shout out, Kira. Just saying. Yeah. So, okay, the Copywriter Club. And of course, you want to increase your chances of, being on other podcasts too. So don't put all of your hopes in one podcast because it is a numbers game at the end of the day. So if we put the Copywriter Club podcast, we type it in Google, we find the Apple link and not the host website. And then when you find like the Apple page, you'll find the description and you'll find the list of episodes that's currently on. But that's not where we go. We actually scroll down to the bottom and there are two sections. Listeners also subscribe to and other podcasts in insert niche. Go down the rabbit hole. Give yourself permission to go down the rabbit hole, but don't do it too long. So just like set yourself a timer so you don't do it for too long because it's very easy to get lost down there. But that is how easy it gets, Tyler. That is how you like find that raw list, and then to vet it down, that's when you like really go in and look like, is this podcast still active? Are there guests actually appearing on the show, or is it all solo, for example? Those sorts of things. That's how you kind of vet your list so that you don't pitch to a podcast that doesn't air anymore. But that's how I start off with Plan of Attack.
Okay, so let's say I have like 50 podcasts that I'm like, these are good podcasts. And then, so you kind of just touched on it, but what are some things that I should kind of put into my research? So, I mean, because for me, when I think of, researching podcasts, it sounds daunting. So it's like, okay, now I sit around for 3 hours and listen to 3 episodes. So I know exactly what they talk about, how they talk about their format, like that. What are some things that you kind of just, during that research process, like you're looking at, you kind of vetting, I guess, podcasts, what are some things that you would kind of prioritize as far as saying this is a go or this is probably not a good fit for me right now?
It's as simple as looking at the podcast description.
Okay.
Because the podcast description will almost always share their mission statement in some way or another, as well as their ICA, like their ideal listener avatar, whatever. So they will kind of have that information already. If not, then you can just listen to the trailer part, like the first minute or so of an episode, and they normally recap their mission statement, right? Yeah. And so that is how you find it. And you can just feel it, like trust your intuition as well. Like you can feel it if someone is a good fit or not, just from a picture, just from how they write, just from the episode types, the kind of conversations that they're having. And beyond that, I would look at their website. So I normally just copy and paste the host name, put it in Google, find their website, check it out, look at their social media and see, like, is this the kind of person I want to jam with? Because you're going to have a conversation with this person. If your pitch goes well, you want to get along with this person. Because I've noticed that the level of synergy between a host and a guest, that really impacts the outcome of the episode. So you want to like be friends with this person before they've even met you, really. And you kind of get that feeling from their social media and from their website, see what they're all about. And those things alone, by the way, are actually sufficient enough to send a cold pitch, just so you know. So I know that many people say like, oh, I need to listen to 3 episodes first before I reach out. And like, you can definitely do that. And I would recommend that you do that if you're kind of having a small number of pitches a month, like 10 a month, for example, and you have the bandwidth for it. But there are other ways that you can pick out someone's personality and you see if you're a good fit just on the description, the episodes, the website, and social media. Those will give you enough clues to see if you're a mutual good fit. And, you know, I think the mistake that many people make is that they reach out to podcasters without doing that. And that's when podcasters feel like, oh, you kind of came out of nowhere and you want to be on my platform. Who the heck are you? Right? And so, yeah, I mean, my challenge I did last year, 101 pitches in 30 days. I couldn't listen to 101 podcasts. That would have been way too much. And even though now I focus on the warm outreach, back then I didn't have the time, but I found a way to still give them justice and to still come from a place of value because of the other research points I used. Website, description, episodes, and their social media. Those are enough clues for you to know if you're a good match. And that is how you vet them.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of it is you kind of have that, like, you kind of just know, like when you come across somebody that you kind of like, you know that you're going to vibe with, you know that the conversation will flow, kind of, you know, it'll flow. It sometimes it's, I think we overthink it because maybe the specifics aren't exactly, you know, like, oh, they're interviewing like professionals that have been doing it for 7 years. They won't, I've only been doing it for 2 years. Stuff like that, like, it can matter a little bit, but I think, like you said, just that flow and just being able to see who you vibe with, and then being kind of just the confidence of just reaching out at that point. And then you touched on it. So you don't want to be like, you don't want to kind of just reach out and kind of, you don't want to offend the host. Like, you don't want to offend the host in any way, because that's just not a good way to start any relationship. So when, you know, let's say I've picked out like 50 podcasts and I've kind of done my research. I'm pretty confident that we'll get along well. We have things to talk about. What does this actual pitch, I don't know if we want to call it a pitch, what does this outreach look like, as far as what am I actually saying in the message? What do I reference? What do I, you know, how do I kind of put that together in a way?
Right. So, okay, I feel like I need to get my PDF up because there are 7 elements to a yes-worthy pitch. And to be honest, some of them are very, very simple, but I think for the sake of those who are probably watching that may not have notepads, there are 2 things that I want to share that's relevant to any pitch, whether it's cold or whether it's warm. These 2 things, if you remember these, you're good. So I call it the PR method. And PR does not stand for public relations, as we know it to be. It stands for personalization and relevancy. It's simple. The thing is, I want to backtrack slightly before I get deeper into that I know that when it comes to the initial outreach, I say that it's not necessarily prerequisite to listen to episodes, but if you do land the interview, they say yes because they like your pitch, then it is a prerequisite to listen to episodes. So I just want to put it out there. So there is, like, again, you still are on the host side, and like, you know, you want to potentially have a long-lasting relationship with this person. So definitely do that. Okay, so that's when you do listen to the episode. But back to the PR method. So the personalization is exactly how it sounds. So spell their name correctly.
Good point. Yeah.
I mean, like, I bet some people have misspelled your surname before, right?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Well, and then they try and say it, and then it's just like a shit show. But
yeah. Like, that's why, like, I need to ask people. And my name has been spelled incorrectly so many times, which is ridiculous because it's in my email address. So I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm like, to be honest, it's an initial turn off. So that's the first thing on personalization, is their name and referencing their podcast as well. I mean, just saying something generic like, I love your show. I'm like, no, you don't. I mean, never fake trying to be a fan ever, because we smell that from a mile away. Even if you haven't listened to my podcast, like, I will know if you're a good fit anyway, even though you haven't. Hey, Laurie. Like, Laurie's here too. What's my train of thought?
Personalization
Yes.
and
Relevancy. Yes. So the personalization, again, is just the name and the podcast name. And there is a phrase that I put into my pitches, and I say, I understand that your podcast is about helping insert information. So do not copy and paste what someone has written in their description, because I received it the other week and oh my God, it was so sly. I shared with my students actually on a training the other week. I was like, if I look at the color of the font, it's a slight off tint of gray and everything else is black. So I knew it's copied and pasted. Yeah, like, yeah, we pick up these things, you know. But here's the thing, as copywriters though, you know, we know what it's like to use voice customer data. So I want you to look again at the podcast description and the episodes, pick out the buzzwords that they use. So for example, my buzzwords are things like rebels and courage and impact. Like those are the things I like really value. So if those are reflected back at me, then it feels like, oh, okay, this person does know me. And sharing that statement of like, I understand your podcast is about X, that thing that most people don't put in their pitches. But that is like the segue for you to be like, hey, let me meet you halfway. This is your mission. This is how I can help you. Here are some ideas I have for you for a potential podcast interview. And there we go. So that's the relevancy piece. And then I want you to sign off with the no pressure, because there's a reason why so many podcasters are like, nope. It's because there are so many people who come from a place of self-importance over service. But there is a singular line, which I know off the top of my head, which I want you to write in your pitches. Whether or not I'm a good fit for your podcast, I truly wish you all the best for the continued success of your show. Insert podcast host name.
Yeah.
And that has been brilliant feedback from hosts, because I do ask them, what made you say yes? And, you know, many of them have said like, it's because you didn't pressure me and it was a friendly sign off. Like you didn't care whether you got it or not. You came to me with value and you gave me the choice. The ball is in my court. If you make them feel that way, then they're more likely to say yes to you.
It's just another person that you're talking to, right? So you have to kind of use these. It's weird because I think we all have, so we know social cues, we know how to like be a nice person and kind of, you know, not offend and things like that. But then when it comes to pitching, for a lot of us, we forget all of that. And it's those simple details at the end where it's like, you know, you're kind of just you're acknowledging, you know, what this is and you're just being a good person. It's those details that people really, really remember, because so few people take the time to actually add those in. And it seems like a small, minor detail, but that can be all the difference.
Yeah, there's a quote that I always love to remember and remind myself, because sometimes we look for the most complex things in order to, you know, for it to really work. But I think at the top of my head is never mistake the lack of complexity for the lack of impact.
That's good. Yeah. And yeah, it's one of those things that just applies to so many things. Because I mean, especially as copywriters, like that's our business, is simple, hard-hitting, powerful. So kind of using that. And what you touched on earlier is using, you know, knowing these buzzwords, knowing this voice that the podcast or the guest already uses, and sliding in that way. Because if you come in like totally professional and suit and tie where they're, you know, a casual podcast, then you're just gonna obviously come across extremely tone deaf. And it's crazy, like seeing buzzwords like that, and it's just, you know, simple words that we use. As soon as you see it in an email, you kind of like, your defenses drop a little bit. And you're like, oh, this is like just like a friend that we can kind of just really talk to, instead of having it being this stiff professional relationship that I think a lot of people are, you know, opposed to. Damn, that's good stuff. I'm gonna have to definitely take some notes on this. That PR.
Yeah, that's that's a lot easier to remember than 7 elements. But just personalization and relevancy. You're good.
Yeah. And then that last, I think, man. So everyone watching this, that what Mai-kee said about ending your emails or ending your pitch with a non-pressure, almost like a thank you. It's like almost like a thank you for taking that second to consider me. And,
Yeah.
and I think more than just being like, considerate of their time and energy, it's also kind of like a subtle, like appreciation for the hard work that this podcast host puts on for their own work. Like they're doing so much stuff behind the scenes to find the right guests, to find the right setting, to find the right themes. And when you're just like pitching at them, like, "Hey, I want to be on your thing," like you're not really. It's just a little bit inconsiderate. So taking a
Yeah.
little bit more time to like show that you are, appreciative of their work, I think that just goes a long way.
100%.
Okay, so we've got our prospect list. I know what to say. I know how to woo my host to try and to get them in. Now let's say that I have officially booked a podcast. I've booked my first podcast. I'm so excited. It is in 3 weeks. Like I think I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready because I've never done a podcast before. So leading up to the podcast, like, maybe a week in advance, and then maybe to like the next day, what are some things that you help or that you recommend a guest to do to get ready for this podcast, to make sure that it is, everything that they hope and dream it to be?
So I want to remind each and every one of you that just because you have been booked on once, it doesn't mean that it's a one-time only thing. Meaning you can come back onto the podcast depending on the experience you provide for the host. So the lull time between when they say yes, between when they book, it can be a couple of weeks, because podcasters, we kind of need to batch in advance. Like I'm batched until August, so I'm good, but like it takes time to do all of these things. So what you can do as the guest is to like shout out about it on your social media, and always tag the host, because when they see like, oh, so Tyler's like shout about this like a couple weeks ahead, so that's really awesome. So that gives them an idea of what they can expect when the interview actually airs. Like I had one of my guests, like she promoted it she promoted it more than I did like before the episode even got recorded and before it aired, and I'm like, yes, future guest to come back. So yeah, you can definitely do that. And there's a question I also asked the host, because you're preparing for the interview, right? So you can ask them like, hey, what can I do to make this episode really valuable for you and your audience? Because they normally ask in the correspondence, oh, if you have any questions, let me know. And it's kind of like, at a job interview, if you don't have questions, then they're kind of like, oh, you haven't really thought about the position, have you? It's kind of like the same feeling. So if a host does ask you, oh, do you have any questions? Or even if they don't, you can be proactive about it. You can ask them like, hey, is there anything special that I can do for you and your audience to make it super valuable? Do you prefer more step-by-step tips? Do you want more examples? Do you want more stories? Like, just, tell me what I can do to make it super valuable for you. And then they're going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, all right. I mean, I've had 2 guests, for example, who have made landing pages. I'm pretty sure that it's been like duplicated from their already existing one, but even so, the extra effort counts. But even if it's duplicated or not, they have a dedicated landing page just for my audience. So it'd be like the insert URL / Quiet Rebels. So they can go there. It's their URL just for my listeners. So just something like that can be helpful. Like, oh, hey, I can make this like special gift for your listeners if you want. Here's the page. What do you think? So that can be something you can do, and it makes a huge difference if you go the extra mile that way.
I think, just showing that you're invested in this, like you're actually taking this opportunity, not for granted, right? You're actually showing that you're showing that you're prepared, you're showing that you're organized, and then just showing like you appreciate this opportunity, that you're not just, waking up and like, all right, time to do this stupid podcast. Like you're actually, showing you want to be there and that you actually want to give value, because at the end of the day, that's why the host chose you, is because they felt that you could provide some value. So leading up to it, I think that that whole, you want to make it a whole, like, and I think like you said, one pot, it doesn't have to be just one episode and then never talk to this person again. Like I'm gonna ask you in a little bit, but I think there's so many more opportunities that can come from that first episode or first guest appearance that can turn into things that you maybe weren't even considering, but it's just you're establishing a relationship as a nice professional. person,
Yes.
which goes a long way.
Yes.
Okay, so so I've posted about it. I'm ready. Now the podcast starts in like 20 minutes. What do I do to hype myself up, to calm I guess it's like a combo of hyping myself up but calming myself down at the same time. What do I do? What do I do? How do I make sure I don't bomb this?
Oh, I love this question. So first of all, you want to make sure that everything is prepped in advance, preferably more than 20 minutes. So it's just things like your microphone, have it set up, make sure you have the link. So I recommend that you actually have a folder, particularly in your Gmail or Outlook, whichever one you use. Have a folder dedicated just to podcast interviews, because some podcasters will only send the link once and some will send it repeatedly. But you just want to be organized so you're not faffing about trying to find the link. Otherwise, that's going to make you more nervous. So make sure that you've got your notes and your microphone, you've got the link, and you've told people in the house, like I sent a screenshot to my family. I'm like, here's my call schedule, be quiet and please be careful of the internet bandwidth at these times. I'm getting so bossy sometimes, but yeah, so you want to do that first. But when it comes to the physiological and the psychological warm-up, so this is what I call the ramp-up routine. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at this, but head on over to my Instagram at Mai-kee Sang and you'll see that I did a part of my ramp-up routine before this interview. It's me dancing very badly, I might add. So yeah, you need to know what works for you, because for me, I have two trains of thought. One, if the host is someone who I feel like I need to be like super, super confident for, not to say I don't need it for anyone else, but there are some who you really want to make a good impression on and really impress, especially if there's someone you've looked up to. So in that case, I need to go down the confidence route. So I put on my jam. It is Meghan Trainor's All About That Bass, nice, which is on my Insta stories. And so I just dance around, and the dancing around allows you to shake out any excess energy, because if you don't shake it out from your body, then it actually manifests as nerves and that tingly feeling that you get in your body. So that's what actually helps to get it physically out of your system. So that is what I do. And if I want to calm myself, then I actually watch this video. It's the Crazy Ones advert by Apple, the one that Steve Jobs actually voiceovers, and that makes me feel really grounded, because that's all about helping the rebels of the world push forward in humanity, even though if people don't understand them, because my podcast is the Quiet Rebels podcast, so that's what helps me connect to my meaning. But that's me. I mean, you can meditate. Some of my students, she demoed yesterday, like she plays guitar. So shout out to Drea if she's watching this. We also have Drea, yeah, of course, Drea, right? So she strums a guitar, and one of my other students is the exact opposite. She needs to calm herself down, so she has like a cup of tea, and she just gives herself a moment. Like others meditate, others can do a power move, others can sing. Like you do you, basically. And whatever makes you feel calm and collected and confident in yourself, that's what you go with.
Yeah, and I think just come in with the perspective of having a good time, right? It doesn't have to be, most likely it's going to be some sort of professional, business-oriented podcast, but that doesn't mean it needs to just be, super stiff. And
yeah.
People listen to podcasts because they want to be entertained and educated, right? So it has to be, I think a fun experience, and then it just makes the conversation just go a lot easier, like we're doing now.
Yeah, exactly. And people hear emotions, by the way. I mean, even though podcasts are an audio show, you can tell when someone's smiling when they talk.
Yeah,
it's just a certain tone. So don't be afraid to pause. Don't be afraid to vary up your tone and your speed, just to share your emphasis and to share your character as well, because that's what accelerates the know, like, and trust factor. That's why podcasting is so effective, because like when you hear the voice, it's in your ears, it's very close to you, it's very intimate. When someone whispers to you in real life, it's an intimate moment, right? And it could be a romantic moment, or it could be a creepy moment, but you know, the point is they when you're in someone's earbuds, it kind of like bypasses their initial guard that they normally have for other people around them. But it's so close and intimate to them. So that's why it accelerates that know, like, and trust factor. And I think that's what a lot of people underestimate, really. And so, you know, don't be monotone, and just like be yourself. And the pauses, by the way, they do help. There's a reason, because I'm so excited about this topic, so I can speak really fast like this. But did you notice that when I shared the quotes, like never, what's the lack of complexity one? That quote, right? Yeah. So when I shared it, I paused.
Right.
It has a lot of emphasis, and plus, give people a chance to catch up when you're talking. Because the speed in which you talk is not the same speed in which they receive and understand and comprehend what you're saying. So pause. So I'm trying to do a live demonstration right now.
Your pauses are actually really good. I noticed that as soon as we started talking. I was like, oh, well. Yeah, so that's really good. And yeah, and I think, yeah, just like you said, having this this confidence, and then knowing like what you're saying is good stuff too, and being, because I think like I have this issue too sometimes when I'm like speaking about something, is like I almost want to just say it quickly, because I you know, I don't want it to be misconstrued, so I just want to like say it and be like, yeah, like whatever. But I think there's just like such a big power, there's such power in these pauses, and just, you know, knowing like that, like you said, people need time to process, and they want time to process so they can actually think about it, and not just have like a waterfall of words coming at them, because nobody is going to really remember or understand that.
And on that note, actually, if you can, even though again podcasts are audio shows, I would recommend keeping your video on if it's okay with the host, because what I love about this interview is that I can see your facial expressions, I can see how you express, you know, with your hands and all of the things. And when it comes to pausing, sometimes it's really difficult when it's audio only. But again, it really depends on the podcaster and how they record the episodes. But most of them are actually on video on Skype or Zoom. And so if you can keep the video on, I would recommend you do, because it allows you to communicate, you know, with the host with your non-verbal communication cues. So for example, I will do this, and this is actually a gesture that's actually where I'm dominant, where I'm like, wait, I'm pausing, I'm emphasizing. So for example, if I'm talking about a story and I'm taking people through a visualization exercise, I would use my hand gestures to actually non-verbally communicate with the host, like, oh, don't interject here. You know, this is the moment where we all need to be present. So I
was looking for that.
Yeah, sorry, like my desk is too high. But okay, I'm like
Yeah, that's so good. I've never even really thought about that, because yeah, because I think a pause can feel awkward if you don't, if both people don't know there's a pause, and then it's and then it just, okay, that's awesome. So now, as far as like kind of the current climate, like where we're at, how, you know, what would you say can people kind of use, like, so how should somebody kind of organize their, you know, so let's say for the next, I'm like committing to podcasting, like what do I need to do to really make this a part of my outreach strategy? Like, I don't want to just, you know, say I do 2 episodes and then leave it alone. Like, how can I actually make this a part of my strategy in a way that will help my business, right? Because I think, you know, one of the hesitations people have about podcasting is that it could seem like frivolous, right? But I know you have examples where copywriting or podcasting has led to very substantial, you know, business opportunities. So how can I kind of wrap my head around this to make it a real part of my business?
That's a great question. And I think because I think as a human race, and just like how like technology has grown and all the things, we are so used to instant gratification. So it's kind of like, oh, this didn't work after one episode, nothing came of it. But here's the thing. You need to show up consistently, because sometimes it takes a couple of moments, touch points even, when someone finally feels like, yes, I'm ready to work with Tyler now. There is a reason why we're taught in sales, like sometimes you need to follow up with someone like 8 times, or, you know, there's more than one go. There's fortune in the follow-up, they say. And it's the exact same sort of idea, that it takes multiple touch points before someone's actually ready. And you showing up on a consistent basis is what helps them, like, you know, reach that point of decision. So you need to think about your own personal bandwidth in your business, because consistency doesn't mean you have to post constantly. Quotable. And the same is with podcast guesting. You don't have to do it constantly. You just need to do it in your bandwidth. So for me personally, I will never do the 101 pitches again, because I really want to build nurturing relationships with podcasters now. I want to make them stronger, because I have a big vision of creating a platform where I connect podcasters to guests. And I can't do that if I'm doing all of this en masse. It's all about relationship building. And I want you to think about it the same way. It's not just about the appearance. It's not just about, you know, having something to add on your media page. It's not like that. It's the long-term relationship that can happen as a result of this. And so I would recommend pick a number that you can 100% stick to, and you will stick to on a monthly basis. My number would be between 5 and 10 now. That's 5 to 10 pitches. And I am going to be extremely intentional about it. I am going to make sure I'm on the host's radar, that I have a relationship with them beforehand, that they know of me before I even reach out, because I'm looking for long-term relationships. And this is where it's at. When the interview goes live, you would have started a relationship with the host. So it's up to you how you nurture it. And ways that you can nurture it, you can always reshout the interview, because it's not just relevant on the day it goes live. You can use that interview and actually leverage it in a pitch. You know, like, hey, I've been on this podcast, which you may know of. I've talked about this kind of before. Here's a different angle. You can leverage it that way. Because you would have connected with the host, you would have known their expertise. So I can think of one off the top of my head. She's my current brand strategist and web designer. So I know of her. And so I can recommend her. And I just did yesterday. I sent her a referral. So that is how you build this relationship with the host. And that's what keeps you top of mind for them. And you honestly never know when the dots will connect for your opportunity. Whether it's a lead, whether it's an invite to a summit, to speak on a stage, to be invited back on a podcast, to be referred onto another podcast, the dots will connect one day, but not if you stop and start. Just start and keep going.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been the theme of like all of this week of talking about like pitching strategies and getting in touch with people, is that it has to be a longer term thing. It has to be kind of an intentional consistency, because it's so rare that that you really reap the benefits after one thing. Like if I'm sending out 10 cold emails and then I don't get a response and I quit, then it's like, okay, like what do I really expect? And in the same way, it's like if I'm not, you know, intentionally sending a certain amount of copy or podcasting pitches each month, then what can you really expect? It's hard to, you know, really build up any sort of momentum if you're not kind of intentionally creating that momentum for yourself.
Exactly. And can I quickly just share something on that? Because I want to be completely honest about the challenge that I did. Because there was a point in those 30 days when it was just a numbers game. So what you just said about like, oh, you know, I sent out 10 pitches and I didn't get anything out there. And that keyword get is like, it's just like, it blew up. I was like, oh my gosh. Because when I was pitching, I did think, oh, I need to send out 10 pitches today so that I can get, increase my chances, whatever. And that is when you flip the table and you go from service over self-importance to self-importance over service. And intentions, what you said about intentional consistency, we can feel intentions. And no matter what scale you are on the woo, whatever, we can feel intentions because it comes across in the energy you put into the pitch. And I had to actually step back from the challenge and I had to say, Mai-kee, you can't pitch anymore until you come from a place of service again. Because these first impressions can be lasting impressions. And however you choose to start that relationship is on you. And you want it to be a good thing. You want it to be a good start. And you can't do that if you only have the intention to get. So I just had to say my spiel on that because it is important.
That is so powerful because, like you said, we are definitely an instant gratification society, and it's get. What can I get? What can you get? And I think putting that in the back seat, and of course, like everyone has their self-interests, which are totally fine. Like you should want to build your business, you should market yourself, but the way to do that is by service, right? And then all of that stuff kind of comes from it. So dang, that is amazing stuff. So one last question I want to ask to wrap it up. I guess for people watching that are kind of, they're ready to really make this or think about making this a part of their outreach strategy. What is one fatal mistake? So I think we touched on a lot of things as far as the pre-outreach, the outreach itself, the podcast itself, like being a guest. What is one of the most like common fatal mistakes that potential, podcast guests or people that want to pitch podcasts, what is a fatal mistake that they usually make? Could be like a logistics thing or a mindset thing or a planning thing, but what is like the one thing that you would say makes the biggest difference between a successful podcasting plan and one that kind of just falls apart?
I have to ask this question. I kind of stumped him. So is it okay if I kind of like use something we kind of already said because because it bears repeating. I'd say the biggest mistake again is coming from a place of self-importance before service, and it's kind of like there's a phrase that I'm thinking of. It's not even a phrase. It's actually kind of like how we're kind of taught to do good things without agendas. And it's funny because we know what the agenda is behind the agenda, but we need to come from a place of no agenda. So it's quite interesting how that kind of works. Like we know of the strategy, but you have to detach yourself from the outcome. That's what it is. You have to detach yourself from the outcome of it, which is why that line exists in the pitch that I shared verbally with you. Whether or not I'm a good fit, I truly wish you all the best of success for your show. So you have to detach yourself from the outcome. That's the only way that you can do it. That's the only way that you can bring peace to yourself, because we can get so caught up in the numbers. And actually it's like a prerequisite before I work with clients now. I ask them, what are your goals? And if they are like, I want to have 1,000 new people on my email list each month, I'm like, sorry, that's not a good fit. And it's not because it doesn't happen. It can happen. It's honestly like you can hit the ball out of the park or you can hit a foul ball. I don't know why I'm using baseball references because I don't even play baseball. But the point is the point is that you never know where the dots are going to connect. It can be immediate. It can be straight when the interview goes live, interviews come in, leads come in, or it can be later on down the line. I still get leads from a podcast episode that aired in September. I know it specifically because I've gotten about 6 leads from it. And I have to keep referring them now because I don't do that same work anymore. But the point is, you have to detach yourself from the outcome, because podcast guesting is a long-term strategy with some immediate gains and some long-term gains, which is a good thing. So that's why you have to show up consistently. That's why you can't give up after one appearance. You have to stick with it. So you really need to like experiment with yourself for like 3 to 6 months. That's enough that's enough for you to like know whether it's something you actually want to continue or not. But you need to detach yourself from the outcome and just understand that the pieces will fall into place when it's supposed to, not when you want it to happen. So be consistent.
That's amazing advice. Just again, in general, for kind of, I guess, all type of outreach and kind of just any, honestly, it, like something like that, detaching yourself from the outcome, it applies to so much. And it's just, it's a simple thought, but it's just so powerful. And I like what you said, that it's not just saying like, just do it and then it'll happen. It's saying, give yourself some time, give yourself 3 months or 6 months, trust that process within that time, and then evaluate, and then say, was it worth, all the effort that I put in? But until you do that, then you can't really, it's like you're doing an ad campaign and you shut it off after 3 days. Like, you don't really.
Yeah, you can't do that. You got to know the data so that you can use to pivot.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
We did that at the same time.
Yeah, I was really up, like, huh. Well, Mai-kee, I really, really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me about podcasting. It's been a few weeks since we chatted, so either way, it was just nice to catch up with you and talk. So I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you because like just the opportunity to first of all speak with you again, let alone for it to be a part of like this free, amazing and incredibly valuable event. The lineup you have, whoa, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about other people. But thank you. I really appreciate what you put together. And I think I can speak for everyone who's watching that, you're an awesome guy. And we know that you're in this for the long haul for all of us. So you rock. Keep going at it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you again. Everyone, check out Mai-kee, maikeesang.com. Is that it? MAIKEETSANG.com. She is awesome, and she's everywhere, and she knows podcasting better than anyone knows podcasting. So she's the one. If you have any questions, hit her up, hit me up, and get out there and get your pitch on, everyone. So
get your pitch on.
Exactly. Thank you, Mai-kee. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and see you around.
Have a now.
See ya.